alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bukaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdiningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng luwalhati pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinigaya na pag may mag-aapi, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
I invite everyone to make the sign of their faith. A prayer for the environment. Let us pray for an end to the waste and desecration of God's creation, for access to the fruits of creation to be shared equally among all people, and for communities and nations to find sustenance in the fruits of the earth and the water God has given us. Almighty God, you created the world and gave it into our care, so that in obedience to you, we might serve all people. Inspire us to use the riches of creation with wisdom, and to ensure that their blessings are shared by all. That trusting in your bounty, all people may be empowered to seek freedom from poverty, famine, and oppression. Amen.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nandi Aldaba from the Economics Department of the Ateneo de Manila University, and I will be your moderator for today. On behalf of the Ateneo de Manila University, Xavier University, Ateneo de Cagayan, Ateneo de Davao University, and Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines, a warm welcome to all our participants. Our working group is focusing on Sustainable Development Goal number 2, or Zero Hunger. The goal of this webinar series is to raise awareness on how the discussion on food systems is a multi-sectoral and interdisciplinary issue, and to contribute to food system sustainability through knowledge production and generation. In April 2021, this same group organized the Philippine Independent Dialogue for the UN Food System Summit, which was held last September 2021 in New York. Since then, we have been organizing webinar series and community dialogues on issues like urban and community gardens, the voices and future of the youth, and topics like cooperatives and value chain development, and feeding minds, fighting hunger, healing the planet. This year, we wish to bring awareness on food systems, food security and nutrition, and agriculture-related issues to the general public, in line with the UN Food System Summit theme, with emphasis on consumption and food safety, equitable livelihoods and value systems, and resilience to vulnerabilities. Furthermore, as part of this webinar series, we conducted dialogue with candidates in the May election, which aimed to understand their views and also to articulate our concerns with the future of our food systems, food security, agriculture, and the environment. We also held a webinar last July 2022, where we looked at the role of feeding programs in food systems. Today's webinar in particular seeks to explore the role of researchers from higher education institutions in uncovering new knowledge, policy insights, and lessons related to food systems and issues. It envisions to raise public awareness on the problems caused by food insecurity and undernutrition, and to explore strategies to find sustainable solutions through research and community extension projects implemented in various universities. So let me now introduce to you our excellent panel of speakers coming from prominent universities all around the country. Okay, so for our first speaker, Mr. Harold Bueno is a licensed professional teacher and holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Hospitality and Tourism from Taylor's University, Malaysia. At present, he is the College Dean of FEU Cavite and the former Director and Department Chair in FEU Manila. In 2018, he was one of the 50 plus youth across the globe trained by UN Sustainable Development Solution Network Global School Program to teach and promote sustainable development goals in the classroom. Dean Harold is a strong advocate of sustainable local community-based projects towards inclusive growth and development, focusing on food chain, food consumption, food appreciation, and food cultural preservation in the tourism and hospitality industry. Dean Harold, your floor.
Thank you, Dr. Fernando, for that very generous introduction. Now, allow me to share my screen. I hope you can see it. All right, I assume you can see now my screen. Again, I'm Harold Bueno, and I'm tasked to discuss about the application of farm-to-table concept in tourism industry and making sure that there's synergy in agriculture, gastronomy, and tourism in hope that we can have a sustainable food system in tourism and hospitality. First, I'd like to discuss about farm-to-table. To give you a little background of what is farm-to-table, basically, farm to table is a movement. It started as a movement, and it was here to promote environmentally friendly agriculture, also to preserve our culinary heritage and local food. And that is the movement is devoted to honor local farmers and producers, and that is also to promote direct relationship between consumer and producers. So basically, all of this principles that you can see here, or the goals of the movement, is leading towards to sustainability. It covers environmental programs and also economic development programs and social development programs in this particular movement. So there are several movements sharing basically same principles. And in practice, these three movements, which is slow food movement, local food movement, and farm-to-table movement, is a micro-sustainable food system intended to shorten the process in the supply chain. And when we talk about shortening the supply chain process, it is actually, in theory, it's a slow food, short food supply chain. So what is the intention now of short food supply chain, farm to table, and the rest of the movement? Is it about removing the middleman in the channel in the equation? Yes, probably, because farm to table is getting the food directly from the farmers as much as possible. But if in the process of trying to dig deep of what's going on in the ground when it comes to farm to table, it appears that it is basically about minimizing instead of totally removing the middleman and the channel in the equation. So looking into the keywords in short food supply chain and farm to table, we can see several common words or common themes in the literature. And these words and common themes can be associated to small scale production, small scale farms, and or small scale farmers. Talking about small scale farmers, in farm to table and in farm to table application in tourism, we honor small scale farmers. Hotels and restaurants are in partnership, is trying to build relationship with with farmers and consumers, and trying to use the ingredients available in the locality. So looking into the literature of different tourism segments, such as slow food tourism, community-based tourism, agriculture, farm tourism, health and wellness tourism, creative tourism, culinary and gastronomy tourism, we can have a sense and feel that there is already farm to table in the process. However, the term farm to table was just coined recently in tourism. The common themes that we can see here are basically the same as I have shown you a while ago. It also talks about the small scale production, small scale farms, and small scale farmers. In that sense, farm to table is already there. Farm to table is going back to basic, because before we usually get our food just around us in our backyard. So now this particular system is being applied in hospitality and in tourism industry. That's why this is the reason why there are hotels and restaurants promoting their institution as a farm to table company or organization. So looking into all the data, there are three important industries to make a farm to table system work. And that should be, and it includes agriculture and farming, gastronomy and culinary, and of course, tourism. So the main role of tourism is like a platform to educate the tourists and also educate general public about the principles and philosophies of farm to table. And in making sure that it's sustainable, there should be synergy between the three. There should be cooperation, and building relationship and partnership is the most important aspect to make it work. So I have here a framework in which the three industry is working together for a farm to table concept in tourism industry. So agriculture is basically about production, but in farm to table, when it comes to production, they have a specific target. So there are expectations that it's farm to table, it's mostly organic and natural and small scale, and it's community based, and that is its function. And its contribution is, of course, when it's organic and natural, it is environmentally friendly. And for small scale farmers, its contribution is more on motivating the farmers, how important they are, the small scale farmers in the community. And it's about building relationship between consumer and producers. Now, gastronomy is the one to convert all the produce or culinary, all the produce of agriculture. And again, they have specific target function because they have specific target contribution in farm to table. So basically, it's about preservation of our culinary heritage, preservation of making sure that the food is healthy, and of course, somehow to make it sustainable, it should be profitable, and it's an idea, or it's a concept for entrepreneur and chef. And its contribution is to provide fresh and healthy food to the consumer, and also a business concept or idea to earn profit for this particular industry. Now, tourism has an important role in this framework, because tourism is on promotion, promoting not just the restaurants and hotels into this concept, but also promoting the whole system, the microsystem. Even household can follow or can do in their own community. So it's about promoting. Tourism is a platform to promote, at the same time, again, educate the consumer of what is farm to table and its principle and its philosophies. And its contribution, definitely, it's stakeholders' alternative income, especially in the nearby community, and of course, consumer awareness. And in hope that consumer will also practice the concept of farm to table, meaning talking directly, building relationship with our producers and farmers within our community. Now, moving forward, as I mentioned here, tourism and hospitality institutions should have a good rapport or good partnership or cooperation between agriculture and tourism. And in working on it, small-scale farmers and producers should be the heart of the system. So communicating with small-scale farmers and producers is a vital and important aspect in farm-to-table system. So let me share with you some vital statistics, at least in our country. We have, we are currently conducting a survey, or we are writing a report with CRCA and FAO about small-scale farmers and how they are related, or the system between the small-scale farmers and hospitality and tourism industry. So here are some interesting data that I would like to share with you. As you can see, we only have 21%, at least in 178 respondents in this or institution in this research. 21.91% of them is the actual institution who supports small-scale farmers in the Philippines. And the rest, which is 78%, is not really into supporting small-scale farmers, or not yet into supporting small-scale farmers. And the motivation, surprisingly, because surprisingly, it's about the trend. So people are interested about it. People are talking about it. So that's number one motivation among the institution who are supporting small-scale farmers. But as you can see, hindi naman po nagkakalayo yung data and information, but on top really is the trend, because it's a trend. That's why most of the institutions are into, following this system. But it's good to also know that it's part of the corporate social responsibility, that they have anchored this system in their corporate social responsibility, and they also would want to make sure that their food system in the institution is sustainable, and of course traceability. They want to know where the food that they are serving in the institution came from, or who worked on it, who planted, who harvested, and so on and so forth. And also a part of marketing and branding of that institution. So what are the challenges based on the survey? So as you can see, on top of it is the established rapport between two parties, meaning the consumer, the farmers, producers, small-scale farmers, and the tourism and hospitality institutions. And another one on top is the quality of the products and produce, which I think the reason why it's happening because of the established rapport between two parties, meaning communication is another concern in this data that you can see in the screen. And another challenge is the demand and supply negotiation, in which communication again is something that in which communication is another factor why this is again the challenge in this part. So the way forward to work it out, so according to them, it's effective if both parties should identify the nature of efforts by engaging all the stakeholders. At the same time, create action plan evaluation for the supply chain system with the small farmers and producers, and communicate the effort and accomplishment through marketing communication and ending communication to all stakeholders. So as you can see, it's still about partnership and communication is the concern here. And of course, the way forward is always a synergy. The three systems should work together, should talk, should cooperate for this micro system of farm to table and tourism industry to work and then to make sure that it's sustainable. So with that, we can say that there should be a synergy of agriculture, gastronomy, and tourism, plus constant relationship building and communication based on the data that I have shown you. And it's equals to sustainable food system. I would like to say it's micro food system because again, we're trying to build a small community here, a small system wherein producers are accessible to the consumer, and consumer is accessible consumer can have a direct partnership with the producers. With that, thank you so much. Let us create more sustainable microfood system. Keep in touch. I have here in the screen my email address. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Dean Harold. It was a very interesting concept of farm to table in the tourism industry. So let's have our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Maria Rosario Chari Mosqueda. She currently serves as Dean of the Xavier University's College of Agriculture and teaches agricultural processing, handling, and storage, and food engineering. Chari completed her PhD in biological engineering at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada as a Fulbright scholar. Passionate in promoting a stronger research and extension culture in her organization, she has led and encouraged the involvement of her colleagues in a number of research and extension projects over the past few years. She is focused in making a contribution towards strengthening the sustainability of smallholder high-value vegetable supply chains. Dean Chari.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aldaba. Good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you for this opportunity to share our work in this platform. My sharing will cover 3 areas. So the first, if we can have the next slide, please. I'll share a few information about our organization, and then I will share about our local vegetable industry and the challenges of our farmers. And then lastly, I will share with you some of the initiatives we implemented and the lessons we learned along the way. Next slide. The College of Agriculture of Xavier University was established in 1953 by a Jesuit priest. It is currently recognized by CHED as a Center of Excellence for Agriculture Education, and under the National Agriculture and Fisheries Education System, Xavier is also recognized as a Provincial Institute of Agriculture. Our agriculture program also has a Level 3 PASCO accreditation for more than a decade now. Our research and social development agenda, if you can go to the next slide, centers around the 4 pillars of food security: food availability, accessibility, utilization, and stability. So one of the focus areas of this agenda are the vegetables. Next slide. So why do we focus on vegetables, particularly highland vegetables? Next slide, please. Northern Mindanao is critical to the to a sustainable vegetable supply in the country. In 2018, for example, the region accounted close to 20% of the national vegetable production volume. About 2/3 of the region's production come from the province of Bukidnon. Most of the vegetables produced in Bukidnon are brought here in Cagayan de Oro, where the major vegetable trading hub is located. From Cagayan de Oro, vegetables are transported to various parts of North Mindanao, some key areas in the Visayas, and even as far as Metro Manila. The second reason, if we go to the next slide, is that many rural families, particularly those located along the foot slopes of Mount Kitanglad, rely on vegetable farming for their livelihood. In our baseline assessment of the 8 highland barangays shown on the screen, which covers about 6,461 families, it showed that 71% of them are engaged in vegetable farming. Next slide. This slide shows which of the 8 barangays are heavily dependent on vegetable farming. So if you can look at the blue bars, those represent the number of farmers engaged in vegetables. So if vegetable farming is the main source of livelihood in these communities, farmers also consider working as laborers in other vegetable farms as a secondary source of income. So literally being farm owners and being laborers in vegetable production is the main source of livelihood. On the next slide, we will see that vegetable farming in these areas is a family affair where spouses, parents, siblings, and children are involved. So if we took the average of those engaged in vegetable farming, and the average age was about 37.5 years old, much lower than the reported average age of farmers nationally. If we go to the next slide, we will see our reasons. Why? Our third reason why we focused on vegetables. Because when managed well, vegetables could be a good vehicle to alleviate poverty and improve the food security among farming families and communities. As shown on the screen, the net profit to cost ratios of high-value vegetables compared very well to those of the staple and industrial crops. Further, if we go to the next slide, we can see that the job generation potential of vegetable production is also high, as shown by this labor utilization rates. In our jobs value chain analysis for highland vegetables, we obtain even higher estimates than what are reflected on the screen. Next slide. Despite the economic importance of vegetables, however, our smallholder farmers are plagued with many concerns for decades, from production until sales and distribution. On the screen are some of the familiar challenges confronting our farmers. These were derived from several focus group discussions we held in Bukidnon. We grouped these challenges into 4 major areas: high production expenditures, inadequate support services, post-harvest losses, and unpredictable price fluctuations. These challenges and issues were confirmed when we did barangay-wide farming needs assessment in those 8 highland communities in Bukidnon. On the next slide, we will share with you 3 initiatives that we implemented, which we hope will be a contribution toward alleviating some of the problems plaguing our smallholder farmers. Next slide. The first one is on vegetable dehydration as a means of reducing post-harvest losses. Huge post-harvest losses, both at the farm and at the market levels, are particularly felt whenever market prices plummet to unprofitable levels. Sometimes farmers do not have a choice except to leave their fresh produce on the field because they will lose more if they harvest and transport this to the market. If there are typhoons and boats are not allowed to travel to the Visayas, for example, vegetables could end up in garbage bins at the trading hub. Our team, if we go to the next slide, designed and fabricated a heat pump assisted dehydration system or systems, because we had two, one at 5 kilograms and 100 kilograms, using locally available resources so we can produce or investigate the production of vegetable granules and powders. Next slide. We partnered with two food companies and investigated the production of carrot granules as part of the condiment pack of instant noodles and the use of squash powder as substitute for artificial coloring in pancit Miki production. After several runs, our products finally met their quality specifications. Our challenge now is how we can make these technologies more affordable so farmers can tap these institutional markets. Because in our interviews with instant noodle manufacturers, their dehydrated vegetable requirement is sourced from China. The next slide, our faculty members also developed food products supplemented with dehydrated vegetables. This could be used for feeding programs and in disaster food relief operations. These products were also well received by local representatives from DepEd, the SWD, OCD, as well as some of the city residents when we had consumer panel tests. The other initiative, if we go to the next slide, that we implemented was aimed at addressing the challenge of inadequate support services. As you can see in our screen, these are the results of our baseline assessment. Farmers in highland communities are not very aware of government programs and services. So in one of our projects, we go to the next slide, we trained and formed 32 vegetable farmers who were nominated by their respective LGUs to become community-based para-technicians. These para-technicians are equipped to assist LGUs, particularly the municipal agricultural technicians in vegetable extension work especially in the highland communities. So we developed an 8-module formation program and designed a deployment scheme where para-technicians become immersed in extension work. On the next slide, you will see some of the activities of our para-technicians when they had their deployment. So after the project, some of the para-technicians were even tapped by their respective LGUs to assist in extension training and in providing services during the pandemic. Lastly, our team also developed, together with the farmers and municipal agricultural technicians, educational apps that can be used by our LGU technicians and para-technicians in their extension work. So on the screen, you can see some of the mobile apps that we have developed, and I believe 4 of them are already in Google Play and can be downloaded. But these are the academic version. The farmer version or the para-technician version are in the Cebuano dialect. Lessons learned. We have the next slide. Personally and professionally, we really gain a lot from our engagement with farmers, traders, truckers, and other actors of the vegetable supply chains. So let me just share a few. So one is, the more we learn, the more we become deeply engaged with the vegetables, with the industry, the more we appreciate the complexity of addressing the issues and challenges. Thus, partnerships, although it's a cliche, but partnerships really between Farmers, their communities, government, academe, and other industry stakeholders are essential because no single actor can address the issues on his own. The second is we recognize the potential of the use of community-based para-technicians to speed up the delivery of extension services. When properly formed, these para-technicians could bridge the extension gaps in local government units, so they can become able assistants of municipal agricultural technicians. Third, this is for our own. We have discovered that we can design, fabricate dehydration systems, and produce commercial grade dehydrated vegetable products using our meager, locally available resources. However, institutional support for R&D, continuous R&D, and partnership with key stakeholders are critical to improve quality, efficiency of these technologies, and reduce cost. Lastly, as a teacher, I see the farmers field as a very rich resource for developing context-based learning materials for elementary and high school students in farming communities, incorporating field examples in science, technology, and entrepreneurship subjects augurs well for the education of our future farmers. So again, we thank you very much for this time, and Xavier University College of Agriculture welcomes collaborations as we continue our work with smallholder farmers. On our last slide, we would also like to acknowledge our partners and our funders for supporting our programs. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dean Chari, for enlightening us with the vegetable production in Northern Mindanao and the many initiatives that the College of Agriculture of Xavier University is doing. So let me now introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Julian L. Carandang. He is a full-time graduate student from the Department of Political Science and Development Studies at the De La Salle University, Manila, where he is undertaking his dissertation on the food security experience of Baler, Aurora, and Lian, Batangas. He was also previously an assistant professorial lecturer at the Department of Political Science and Development Studies. He likewise served as program associate of the Yuchenko Center as the resident representative to the Philippine Apex Study Center Network. His current research involves interdisciplinary studies on food security policies and community food systems for urban and coastal cities. Mr. Carandang.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to share my experiences and the studies that I have done over the years. Now, a disclaimer in that my experience, my approach might not necessarily be the same with most food security researchers or for most food security students. The reason being is, yes, I am from the social sciences. My undergraduate is actually consular diplomatic affairs. My master's is in development policy, development studies. So I'm more with the international aid into policy development. And yet, because of where I come from and my background, I have a different perspective than most social science students, practitioners, given that my father's the former dean the biology department from the biology department, the College of Science in the LSU. So my actual training as a researcher is from the natural sciences. So that was how I have this my background, my training, my understanding is actually more from the science, more technical. And then it evolved to a point wherein how can we maximize the data? How can we improve upon the research because from a natural science perspective, it limits us, given that there must be something to bridge in order to have a more credible impact to society. Again, this is not to undermine the contribution of both the natural sciences or even to limit the impacts from the social sciences, but we have to understand that each has their own strengths and each has their own limitations. And I'm fortunate to have that kind of background since, as I will show later on, there are certain aspects of studying food security wherein we realize that we cannot get the big picture. We can compartmentalize, we can focus, we can have directed research, we can have directed approaches. It makes it not just practical, viable, but more so because it is allowing us the ability to have concrete goals if we just focus on one aspect. But then we start to also appreciate as we are evolving the concept of food security, and as we now have a better appreciation of it, moving beyond simply on environmental and ecology and sustainability, and now to actually using the terms of food security, now actually focusing on the use of food safety and even food preference as an aspect, going beyond simple nutrition, simple health and wellness. We have to then realize that there are more aspects of the conversation that we can actually understand if we apply lenses separate from those we began studying an issue. Hence, why I believe it is important for us to be open-minded, but at the same time critical of how we look at certain food security considerations. Next slide, please. So we always have to begin with the premise of what is food security. Because food security in its very definition focuses on the human, the actor. And that in itself makes it, in a sense, complicated or complex in how we look at where the origins of the quote unquote questions in food viability, questions in supply, questions in access come about. But then we always begin with the basic tenets. We always focus on availability and access. But that is only a response to how we created the concept of food security. We have to understand that the basic tenets of food security is an evolution of what we value. At the same time, it's an evolution of concepts of those that came before us. First and foremost, food security as we define it is not necessarily a one-fits-all definition. There are many other ways to appreciate it. But what we can agree upon is that the activities inherent in it are the very same ones when we talk about food system activities. So it has to do with producing food, processing, packaging, distribution, as well as retailing, and then the consumption. So these are the core components. But how, as a community, now begins to be understood separate from each other, the experiences, the capacity, once we put that in the question, we suddenly realize that even though we understand what it means to be in a food security situation, it becomes a matter of the differences in communities, in people, in actors, in situations, even in capacities on how they would address their particular issues. One would assume that in more developed countries, more progressive countries, their issue has more to do if they have the necessary purchasing power. So if there is fruit that is not in season, it is a matter of how much they're willing to pay to source that food item is. Versus when you are in a more financially questionable situation, the next thing to ask is, do I even bother? I might have other priorities. I might have other needs wherein I have to focus. And that's why when we talk of food security and food insecurity, we always have to talk about household budgets. Household budgets are where we suddenly realize that the study is actually a human study, where the perspective of social science tries to answer why certain actors, stakeholders, communities have it either better or far worse in their food situation, in their food security situation, in their resiliency, their ability to cope with shocks, and their ability to forestall shortages. Now, when we look at food system outcomes, they essentially lead to what we consider basic tenets of food security, but we have to consider certain aspects. There's a dual mandate of looking at social welfare and then the environmental security and what is available as a natural capital. These have to be considered, but then it depends on the actor or it depends on the level of engagement. From a national policy, it is so easy for government agents, for departments to make a universal statement. But when you go to communities, depending on their capacity, their access, or for that matter, even their preferences, we now begin to question whether or not there is applicability or the viability or at what levels we need to actually put emphasis on. Next slide, please. So to simplify, when we look at the role of social science in food security studies, we have to ask ourselves, where are the points of intervention? Simply put, when we look at trying to improve the food supply, we always look at food and nutrition system because those are the standards we create for ourselves. There's a specific FNRI standard or food nutrition standard. There's a BMI index depending on your race, your age, your social status is very much a reflection of what you will eventually be or what your body will reflect, your health, your wellness will reflect. And then that does not take to account certain nuances. So yes, even if you're able to meet aspects of nutrition, even though you're able to meet the basic requirements for availability of food, there is also an issue of moderation or appropriateness. Whereas, yes, you might address production, processing, transport, retail, and all of the traditional, we still do not necessarily address certain quantities beyond, such as market forces. Hence, we have the question of pricing. At the same time, how about preferences? May they be cultural? May they be religious obligations? So even though you might improve food supply, the individual themselves, the stakeholders, the communities might not be readily receptive of these interventions. One good example is the politicization of food. Yes, we know that food is itself a necessity, but food is itself a commodity because we use it for trade, for commerce, for bargaining. But food is also a political tool. It can be used for propaganda. It can even be used for promoting ideologies. Let's not forget the lessons of history. Governments have been brought down simply because the population have been hungry. Having said that, just feeding might not necessarily meet the prescriptions because of certain religious obligations, certain cultural preferences. Or yes, you might be feeding them, but you might not necessarily be providing these communities with healthy nutritional food. Or maybe you've made them overly dependent to food contributions versus to actually creating a system for them to be self-reliant. Next slide, please. So we then focus on improving access. So after we've dealt with the possibility of improving someone's situation as a means for them to address availability, access comes as a question of social and economic determinants. Employment, income, education, housing, especially social inclusion, are factors that we have to look on when looking at community level at household aggregates. Employment is determinant of household budget. At the same time, the education, a family's education is actually contributory to what they prioritize. So whether it be household rent, whether it be for food budgeting or allowance for children, their background, their training, their experience all contribute to whatever those prioritizations might be. And that limits their access to food. So their financial resources might be compromised. Or even, at the very least, the question of storage and the longevity of food items. It cannot be overstated that household appliances is a determinant of your food viability, your household food safety, security, and viability. Water and power are very much important. If you cannot store food, whether it's a refrigerator or you have means to process that food, whether you're able to can them, to put them in jars, to process them, to prolong their use, or to have alternative uses for them, then not only are you limiting the options, but you've made the food item themselves too expensive to be an essential necessity, simply because you're wasting other potentials within that food item. Now, having said that, are there means to address it? Yes, there are. And then we focus at social economic determinants. It is very difficult to essentially change the climate. So there are certain communities who will readily, annually, always be vulnerable to climate activities. So what do the communities do? They have planning. They know what to do. They store, they save, they travel, they migrate. Those are the things that they can do. But what are the things that they necessarily can do at their own level, their own capacity? That's when we focus on the social science questions of education, employment, and at the very least, preferences. Decision making is very important to an individual if they know the bigger picture, the smaller picture, if they have better capacitated, at the very least, if they're well informed. Next slide, please. And thus, we suddenly realized that there is an actual disconnect in praxis in academia. And this is not necessarily an oversimplification, but it's as an observation. So even though food security studies have continuously shown us that communities can be resilient, that best practices do impact and do contribute to food security, there are certain nuances that we can learn from those experiences. And that most often than not, they are unique to a situation, to a community, or for that matter, they might even be unique simply because of one actor or one factor. But that disconnect is because the simple theory-based approach is limited. It can only focus on one perspective. One good example or one good correlation with that is when we look at how to address issues from a social level, we always go back to poverty alleviation. But in having to treat poverty alleviation, we then need to also address other aspects of a person's life, well-being, their purpose, so to speak, in order for us to eventually reach a agreement that they are able to improve their social situation. Same thing with food security of individuals and community. It is a condition. Therefore, we have to look at standards, we have to look at their capacity and what are their vulnerabilities and then work on them. So the disconnect is very obvious, among other things, between governance and policy changes. Just a forewarning, these are observations I got from the studies that I have conducted or I have been a part of. So there are other viable disconnects or wherein we can have areas of intervention that I might not have necessarily put here, but these are some that I could readily show examples for. Again, governance and policy challenges. Achievement of food security is not always a priority area. That is something not necessarily unfavorable to the situation, but rather it's a positive impact or implication or a positive result wherein society, stakeholders, government, community engagement, wherein they try to combine the resources and then try to really tackle challenges and solve some other aspects of issues, and whether by accident or whether by subconscious decision making, they're addressing food security concerns. One good example, again, is education. If you are able to improve the educational level of individuals, it actually improves their decision-making capacity because now they know more. They're allowed to be given more decision-making. they might have better opportunities in life, to have better paying employment. And those could lead to improving their food security situation. But that's not the issue. It's not the food security, simply just focusing on their educational level. Yes, there is a long narrative about that. But again, the interconnectedness is what matters. So we have to look at the specific nuances of what a community might be vulnerable to or what a community might have strengths in. Now, best practices. Most best practices are not necessarily intended to address food security if they have other pre-existing priority issues. But it also addresses that. Case in point, climate change resiliency. I was part of a study in Sagudai that looked at their climate change resiliency. Um, and the byproduct or a positive impact of that is they don't call it food security uh, activities or food security programs, but rather food. Really, they're making sure they have enough food, they have nutritious food available when there are food shortages brought about by storms, brought about by the weather patterns. But in effect, they're already securing their food situations. So again, there might be focus on other aspects, which then eventually lead to food security. And that constant, that continuous, that habitual, that observable experiences makes it easier for these particular communities to actually accept food security as a concept, as a practice, as an idea to promote and advocate for. Then there's also stakeholders' concerns. We have to understand that compliance with food safety regulations and nutritional standards are not necessarily addressing food preferences or religious obligations. Again, we have to look at the nuances of community structure, community identity. Hence, we have the Food and Drug Authority, who essentially regulates what is considered food and whether or not these food items are actually nutritional. Hence, we have laws such as the food fortification law. But we also have to consider, aside from personal preferences, is the reason for these personal preferences. Perhaps a community is geared to prefer certain food items such as fish over meat simply because of the availability or simply because of the costs of attaining those kinds of food items. Simple as that. Preferences might simply be a factor of the situation. So if it's a fruit is in season, they might readily advocate for it. But if it's not in season, they would either store it or they would simply look for alternative ways or for alternatives for it. For those who are in the study of food preservation, you would already know that the secret to canning, whether it be fish or fruit, is that these are likely harvested far earlier than you'd assume. But because of the processes involved, they still retain level of freshness and viability. And then lastly, we also have to consider that geopolitical considerations as an aspect of the disconnect between practice and academia. Yes, we want food security, but as a researcher, as an academic, we cannot necessarily just go to a community and force our will or encourage them. This is the study that we want. This will help you. No. Again, we also have to be sensitive of the community, their needs, their agendas, their priorities, their capacities. A degree of urbanization and social cultural status is also important to an extent because it allows for the acceptance, the ability for them to readily recognize that you as a researcher going to their community will actually be contributory to the big picture for them, that they will benefit. It is normal, it is easy, it is practical for them to be suspicious of outsiders. So if you're not from that location, if you have no connection, you have no one to intercede for you, it's very difficult. At the same time, if you're bringing scientific equipment and materials, access to the community might very well be a big consideration for your study or for whatever it is you're promoting. Case in point, you might be promoting for modernization. Sometime 2010, I had the good fortune to actually visit CSU. They actually have a post-harvest center there. There's a Carabao center there. So they have a lot of agriculturally focused endeavors. So if you're promoting for modernization, it's so easy to say, why don't our farmers simply adopt modern practices? But then you have to retrain them, you have to reskill them, you have to capacitate them. At the very least, the simple question is, once those equipments are past their expiration dates or whatnot, it becomes another factor of why acceptance of modern improvements to food security, to food production becomes questionable. So there is that disconnect, but that disconnect actually creates opportunities. The moment we recognize where there are areas that there might be limits, whether it be from a natural science approach or whether they might be from a social studies approach, perhaps there we can get the commonality of how to address the situation. The simple thing to consider is this: as long as there is someone advocating, as long as there is someone actively promoting that food security studies is the way to go, and that there is direct and inherent benefit, not just for stakeholder communities, but also in academia, because it is through academia that we are able to create not just the interest, but rather the focus into these issues. We are able to now make it more acceptable as part of government policies, as part of planning. And that's where the entirety comes roundabout. End of the day, for policies to actually have concrete worth, someone must actually be able to convince a policymaker to not just support it, but more importantly, fund those endeavors. Next slide, please. So I apologize if it's very difficult to see, but these are just examples of some of my studies. What you will realize is that if all of these here are actually multidisciplinary. And the reason they are multidisciplinary has more to do with two factors. In order to have not necessarily a successful study, but to have a progressive study that allows you to have a continuation, that encourages to have more development, you really have to go out of your comfort zone as an academic, as a researcher, as a student, because of the access and ability. The natural sciences have two distinct advantages versus to the social studies sciences when it comes to academic, quote unquote, production. One, of course, is publication. They already have a advanced heads up with regards to publication. But that does not necessarily mean that the social science don't have any place to do publications as well. I've been fortunate enough to actually both publish in natural science journals as well as social science journals, provided you're able to find key partners, provided you're able to find like-minded individuals such as yourself who have common agendas, or at the very least interrelated agendas. I actually included here a list which
Sorry,
originally,
Mr. Karandang, can you
Oh.
end soon, please?
okay, so essentially, in ending this, multidisciplinary approach improves the chances of you addressing food security issues. And hopefully, it helps for those who want to study more to actually bridge and go out of your safety zone. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Karandang. Our next speaker is Professor Nicolas Antigua, who earned his master's degree in education, major in administration and supervision at Cebu Technological University. He has been a faculty member in the same university since 2003, where he teaches technology and professional education subjects. He's a proponent and leader of the Mangrove Rehabilitation Project, the UGMA Extension Project, and the Panocos Livelihood Extension Project, which he will discuss. So, Mr. Antigua, Professor Antigua.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nicolas Antigua, Faculty of Cebu Technological University. Before anything else, I would like to say thanks to SDSN Philippines, and to my CPU family for this opportunity. I am here to share with you this kind of extension project. This is the Panocos Livelihood Community Extension Project. This project has provided livelihood opportunity for the members of the Nagmata Fishermen's Association in Barangay Talisay, Danmandayan, Cebu, using fishing gears for catching big fin rip squids. The seed gears are squid trap, locally known as bubu sanokos, and a squid spawning device, locally known as habong or payo sanokos. For their catch, we have big fin rip squid with its scientific name, Scipioteuthis lisoniana. This kind of squid is commonly found in shallow waters. For their fishing gears, we have squid trap. This is a fishpot-like device locally known as bubusanokos. This is framed with bamboo sticks and covered with green nets. We have also squid spawning device. This device is locally termed as habong or payaw. This is composed of bamboo pole as floater with rope as main line and anchorage sit at the bottom. This is where we attach our squid trap or bubu to catch squids. Then we have services given. We have started the project last 2019, and in 2019 we have provided trainings on the making of fishing gears and some seminars on environmental concerns. We also included seminar on environmental awareness. This is for them to respond environmental issues. In 2021, we have provided assistance on the making of cemented anchorage for payaw. The reason why we use this kind of anchorage is that this is quite durable. This is more durable than using sandbags. We have also provided seminar on engine troubleshooting for them to be ready in case the engine is not in good condition. Also, we have values formation seminar for them to be reminded of their individual obligations. In 2022, this year, we have provided assistance on the provision of small marine engines and also training on engine overhauling. This is for them to continue their venture in squid catching. Then we have project beneficiaries. Our beneficiaries are all fishermen that belong to the poorest of the poor, whose interests are to engage fishing on catching big fin or squids. Before, they eventually use squid jiggers and encircling nets. This encircling net is an active type of fishing gear which is eventually prohibited. But now they are using squid trap because they know that squid trap is more advantageous and not prohibited. We have implementing curriculum programs. We have the SFI and BTLET for the trainings of the fishing gears. BEd and graduate school for seminars on values formation and environmental concerns. Then we have BIT Automotive for engine troubleshooting and overhauling. Then for the sustainability aspect, the project is anchored to ESD action principles. We did the responding, engaging, enabling, embedding, sustaining, and transforming. In responding, we did a getting of baseline data. We conducted TNA or training needs assessment, getting the needs of the community. After getting the needs of the community, we did the crafting of interventions and we did a proposal making for funding. In engaging, we did the linkaging. We went to barangays and linked with the LGU, and then we crafted and signed MOA. In enabling, we did the capacity building, conducting training and seminars to the beneficiaries. We have squid trap making, bio making, seminar on engine troubleshooting, and also engine overhauling. In embedding, the project is embedded with the action principles of ESD. The outcomes are aligned to some of the SDGs. We have zero hunger. We also include climate action and life below water. For we are encouraging the beneficiaries to practice the use of environmental friendly type of fishing gears. We also encourage them to do cleanup and planting mangroves. We include also SDG number 17 for we strongly promote strong linkage with the LGU to have strong foundation of our project. In sustaining, we are looking at on the policy making aspect. For the LGU, with the existing policy, we strongly encourage them to reinforce the implementation because as experienced by our beneficiaries, most of their fishing gears were damaged by some poachers. Then for the university, we are teaching the community with the sustainability measures by not allowing to catch small size, by not allowing to collect or gather squid eggs, by not allowing to use illegal means of fishing, and to continue support for good environmental activities. And lastly, in transforming, we are looking at the impact of the project. We are after of the change in economic status of our beneficiaries. Then as of Sir, the change is not so visible, but they feel the difference of previous living and the present. They feel bitter of the present status. We also did the replanning. We did the meetings with the LGU for planning for strict implementation of their existing policy. And also we did replanning for the next activities for the next phase of our project. I think these are all that we can share. As extensionista, we will always remember this saying, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much.
So thank you, Mr. Antigua, for enlightening us on the Panocos project. So our last but not the least speaker is Dr. Eden Delight Miro, an associate professor and chair of the Department of Mathematics of the Ateneo de Manila University. She finished her doctorate and master's degrees in mathematics and her baccalaureate degree in applied math from the same university. She also did her postdoctoral studies in Bielefeld University, Germany. And because of that, she was inspired by the comprehensive social welfare in Germany, which ensures that children attend school and that they are nourished enough to stay in school. This led her to explore the possibility of using the sciences to help improve social protection programs in the Philippines. And in 2016, she formed a multidisciplinary research team called the Community Welfare, Wellness, and Wellbeing Laboratory. Dr. Miro.
Thank you, Dean. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again, Dean Andy, for the introduction, and to the organizers for inviting me to this forum. I'll talk about partnerships towards strengthening school nutrition programs. So insights from the study of of our team. You might find it curious why the chair of a department of mathematics will talk about community health, but I'm here talking about this today because I've worked with many researchers coming from various disciplines such as nutrition and dietetics, developmental studies, economics, health sciences, sociology, and anthropology, and of course, mathematics, specifically statistics and data science. In 2016, so about 6 years ago, we asked the question on how we can use the rigor of scientific research to improve social welfare programs. And as combating the effect of hunger and malnutrition continues to be a pressing concern in our country, we decided to study the large-scale school feeding programs of the Ateneo Center for Educational Development and Gawad Kalinga, or GK. So in our study, we looked at the 3 biggest implementation of the ACE Blue Plate centralized kitchen model in Valenzuela City. So here they have one central kitchen where they feed 15,000 plus students, and across 42 schools, and also elementary schools, as well as daycare centers. And we also went to Mercedes in Camarines Norte, where they have a municipality-wide feeding program, and from 2 central kitchens, catering to 19 elementary schools. And then we also studied the ABCK implementation in Compostela Valley, now known as Davao de Oro. So there they have 14 central kitchens, one for each municipality in the province, but for one municipality, they had to establish 2 central kitchens because of the geography. And so the ABCK, what's interesting about the school feeding in these sites is that they're all community-led. So the whole community is involved, and the local chief executive of the respective sites are the champions, are the actual champions of the program. We also studied smaller kitchens in other parts of the country. For example, in Cainta, Rizal, in Quezon City, in Hernani, in Eastern Samar, in Alang-Alang, Leyte. We also went to Sagyaran and Marawi City. And so before we embark on identifying what we want to answer in our study, we looked at various literature, and we found out that actually school feeding program is present in almost every country in the world. In fact, based on the global survey for school meals program conducted in 2019, about 75% of the more than 125 countries that participated in the survey implemented school meals programs to varying degrees. However, the coverage and quality are lowest in low, middle, and low income countries where there is greater need to alleviate hunger and poverty. Now, informed by this, we decided that our research question was not whether to implement school feeding programs, but how to improve its effectiveness and efficiency. So we conducted the study ran from 2016 until 2019, right before the pandemic. And these are the methodologies that we employed in the study. So we did household surveys, focus group discussions of various stakeholders in the feeding program, from the parents themselves, the teachers, the school heads, the barangay officials, the community leaders, and the local government officials, DepEd personnel involved in the program, and so on. And so we had both qualitative and quantitative data. For our survey, we did 3 rounds of survey, 2 rounds in Valenzuela City, where we have the largest and most mature implementation of ABCK model. And we were we had 300 plus correspondents there. And so the household survey involved questions about the socio-demographic of their households, but we also had the 24-hour food recall component, where we asked the children, we asked the primary caregiver of the children what they ate for the last 24 hours in the span of 1 week. So we did that 3 times in the span of 1 week. So that allowed us to know the intake, the energy and micronutrient intake adequacy of the children. And so for this presentation, I will be talking more about the institutional insights or partnerships that we component of the project. So not really about the quantitative data. For our first one component of the study is we examined how rural and urban poverty influence Filipino children's diet and nutrition. So it is details of this study. You can find it on this paper. And our analysis show that while the poor are more vulnerable to undernutrition, rural and urban households faced unique challenges to maintaining food security. And given these different contexts of the communities all over the country, it is then important that we strengthen the capacity of LGUs in implementing multi-sectoral interventions, as these provide valuable safety nets for vulnerable children and their households. This paper and findings validate the work of Ateneo Center for Educational Development together with Gawad Kalinga. So ACE and GK in their in helping LGUs implement the ACE Blue Plate centralized kitchen model, they do not just do feeding programs. They actually achieve more than just feeding the children. By introducing the model to various LGUs and communities of the country, they are strengthening the capacity of the LGUs and their communities to deliver multi-level and multi-sectoral national services with the community as the integration point, thereby increasing program efficiency and sustainability as it empowers the community and fosters ownership. We look closely at these dynamics in this paper, where we used game theory to investigate the different partnerships of or lack thereof that can exist across different stakeholders of school feeding program implementations. And we also wanted to determine what type of partnerships can support the achievement of the goals of feeding program. We've identified three main stakeholders or players in SFP implementations, as well as their interests and incentives influencing each other's decision. So these are the state. Well, the state could be the central or national government with its appropriate ministries in education, health, and agriculture. And this already includes the schools in our model. Their interest is, of course, national development, and we also assume that there is also an implementation of a national school feeding law framework. And their potential contribution, of course, is they could be the source of resources and budget allotment for the program, and also access to beneficiaries through the schools. Our next player is the local entity. So this could be the local government units. And their interest, of course, is on education and nutrition metrics of their community. And of course, development, local economy. And their potential contribution to the program will be political capital, ability to engage the whole community and motivate them to take part in the program. And they could also be the source of local funds in order to build, for example, the central kitchens and and provide equipments for the central kitchens. And then and the third part is the third party organizations. So they are interest groups with altruism for nation building through education, health, and nutrition. So in our local context, these are the Ateneo Center for Educational Development and Gawad Kalinga. We assume that all players subscribe to this multi-sectoral impact theory of school feeding program. We find that this is a reasonable assumption, since this is the norm in developed countries and is gaining acceptance in developing countries. Now, applying this model to our local context, we find that the involvement of the community, especially through the LGU in SFP, has improved the operational and strategic performance of the program. So this comes in the form of food cost reduction because of economies of scale, and there is also an improved effectiveness of the program in the sites that we've looked at. The rehabilitation rate, so the rate of those children who were undernourished at the start of the program and have been declared nourished through their BMI at the end, is about 86% for Valenzuela City and 90% for Davao de Oro. And so this is higher than the reported rehabilitation rate of school-led SBFP. So those feeding programs where the community is not really involved, or the LGU is not really involved. This improved effectiveness might be because if there is a community or an LGU involved, they could actually provide more feeding days, so 10 to 30 more feeding days. And the feeding starts on time. So once they've determined that beneficiaries, they can start on time. They don't have to wait for the budget from the national government. So we found that sometimes the feeding program gets delayed by up to 3 months because the schools have not received the budget yet. So the LGU can start the program right away by using their own resources. So that's one of, we think that's one of the reasons why the effectiveness is higher. And there's also an improved day-to-day operational monitoring. So since the LGU is involved in the implementation, so it is in their best interest that every day the children, the parents are happy with the food. So they make a lot of changes in the program to fit their context. So the taste of the food. So there's always there's a continuous improvement in the process, and of course in the final product, which is the food. And the goal is always to ensure that the children eat nutritious food every day. So hindi pwede yung hotdog yung ipapakain sa mga bata, or pitong itlog, or instant noodles. So that will not happen. And because the procurement, accounting, and liquidation and monitoring are done by the LGU, operational oversight and accountability are also strengthened. Now, the involvement of ACE and GK in the process has actually provided what we call a humanitarian supply chain innovation. We can think of the ACE Blue Plate centralized kitchen model itself as a process innovation, because it provides an efficient, cost-effective, replicable, and sustainable implementation of large-scale feeding programs. And another important thing that that I want to stress, we think that aside from the process, of course, the important contribution of the involvement of ACE and GK is by providing what we call an intergroup leadership. So we've found out in our in looking at various sites in our study that the national government agencies and local governments are not always open to cooperate with each other. Now, the involvement of ACE and GK induce these agencies and LGUs to interact, build mutual trust, and perceive the usefulness and necessity of a joint relationship. So they sort of act as the bridge holding the hands of both parties.
Dr. Mira, please end your presentation soon.
And also so this is how the program is the program becomes more sustainable and effective. And I just like to end this presentation by mentioning that one of the partners that we've identified in our study are the students. So because when we showed the data to them and allowed them to tinker with our data, they were able to use mathematics to get to know the communities, especially the communities in the rural area whose reality might be different from theirs. And as head of the Department of Mathematics, data and its potential in improving the lives of our countrymen are very important. So we've been working with the collaborative analytics group in the department to do this, and we've started doing interesting studies using machine learning, artificial intelligence, market basket analysis. So that's all. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Dr. Miro, for that multidisciplinary study that you shared. The sharing of the speakers, they're really very rich, and really we don't have enough time to get them to really finish and complete their sharing. Now we have two reactors, one from the macro perspective and another from the micro perspective. So from the macro perspective, we have Dr. Jaime Montesur, who has been with the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN for over 19 years.
where he currently serves as the farming systems specialist based in Manila. So through the years, he has also served in various capacities, including as project team leader, agronomist, emergency coordinator, program manager, and head of Mindanao and Emergency Response and Preparedness Group, including its humanitarian response. Dr. Montesur got his PhD on agricultural science from the University of Tsukuba. Dr. Montesur.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Aldaba, for the kind introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks to the organizers, the Academe Institute of Sustainability and the Working Group on SDG number 2 for inviting FAO to this webinar. I would like to commend all the speakers for their very informative and interesting presentations. And I think in general, the presentations are aligned and contribute to the attainment of the desired outcomes of the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021 and also the Philippines Food Systems Transformation Pathways. I just have some comments and suggestions regarding food systems research, development, and extension initiatives which the Academe can do or enhance for consideration. Number one, putting data within reach to support the transition to sustainable food systems. The vision and actions for food system changes must be firmly grounded on reliable data. And Dr. Miro has stressed the importance of data in her presentation a while ago. More systematic collection and analysis of data that covers various areas of the entire food system should be done. There should be better compilation and comparison of data originating from different sectors to assess the performance of the food system and to inform decision-making. Second, promoting evidence-based policy making and policy alignment. The transformation of the food system needs an enabling environment through country commitment and ownership. It has to be guided by sound policies. The Academe can provide support in the design and analysis of policies that aim to tackle the structural causes of food system underperformance and generate behavior change, particularly by focalizing technical, organizational, and economic support to address gaps among food security and food system actors for more balanced relationships. Also, the Academe can also support the establishment of mechanisms for active policy coordination across multiple sectors and public actors. For instance, the Departments of Agriculture, Trade, Health, Environment, Education, Transport, among others. Third, enhancing public-private collaboration in sustainable food systems development. Food system changes must involve the efforts and interactions of diverse yet interdependent stakeholders. Dr. Bueno and Dr. Miro have noted the importance of partnership in their presentations. Public-private partnership should facilitate an adaptive process of system changes driven by market-led approaches, aligned with national strategies and combined with policy innovations. This process needs to be inclusive and engage the private sector or firms, farms like the agrotourism farms, family farms, commercial farms, and others. Consumers, governments, and civil society organizations with particular attention paid to the marginalized groups. Fourth, facilitating local knowledge building and knowledge sharing. Food system changes need to be built on and sustained by a combination of global and local knowledge and the sharing of challenges and good practices. Setting up local systems for knowledge generation and dissemination can be done. Also, build clear and sustainable pathways to bring knowledge to the field by linking core actors with local and national knowledge providers. For instance, our extension services, local extension services, research institutes, laboratories, knowledge networks, among others. The Academe can also help in enhancing the role of the province-led Agriculture and Fisheries Extension System, or PAFES. With the implementation of the Mandanas-Garcia ruling, additional resources on agricultural extension work can be tapped from the LGUs. The training of para-technicians is a good example or a good strategy to fill the gaps in local extension delivery system. Number 5, build resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stress. The aim is to reduce and prevent risks in the food systems caused by natural and human-induced hazards like the current Ukraine crisis. Research and development may focus on the sustainable use of natural resources, soil health and conservation measures, innovations on location-specific sustainable technologies, social protection, and promotion of community-based disaster-resilient food systems facilities, among others. Interventions may also include enhanced support to community-based service providers, research and development on yield improvements, and production failure risk and post-harvest reduction. This is similar to the study of the Xavier University. And these technologies should be adapted to local conditions. Also, transforming food production groups or clusters into climate-resilient businesses and increase women and youth engagements in food systems developments may be considered. I think that's all. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Montesur. That's quite a lot of suggestions for the Academe. We'll have a lot of thesis and dissertation on your suggestions. Dr. Miro mentioned about partnership with students. Our next reactor is a student. So she is Rizali Dayan Estipona. She's a senior BS Agriculture student at Xavier Ateneo in Cagayan de Oro City. She served as vice president of the Ateneo Crop Science Society student organization during the academic year 2021 to 2022. She has also served the Xavier University Agriculture Student Council as Research and Statistics Department staff. Rizali?
Thank you so much for that introduction, sir. Food systems are indeed a complex interaction between and amongst key actors of the food supply chain. Various value-adding activities are happening in which agriculture surely plays a crucial part, as it is the one who provides the raw materials necessary for the manufacturing of goods and creation of services. And upon watching and listening to the presentations for this food systems webinar, I came to realize that there's something more that we can do collectively as an institution to help in attaining and maintaining sustainable food systems. One that considers the economical, social aspect, and the environmental impacts of food systems in question. At the local level, organizing partnership programs between the academic institutions and the smallholder farmers could help the latter in improving their lives, mainly through diversification of income and bridging of knowledge gaps. This is highlighted from the presentation of Dr. Mosqueda, in which food products were created from the secondary processing of the high-value crops in some parts of Bicol. And they were enlightened that aside from the vegetable itself, they can earn more by processing it. And trainings and seminars were also provided to the local farmers so that they can be better in managing their farms. They even learned how to access mobile-based agricultural applications that could help them keep track of and monitor not only the performance of their crops, but as well as their performance as farmers. The lives of farmers could also be improved if they have more control in value-adding activities. In the farm-to-table concept, as discussed previously by Dr. Bueno, farmers could take part not only in the production, but also in the processing of goods. And this is also beneficial in cutting down economic and environmental costs acquired during transportation, distribution, packaging, and delivery of products to the end consumers. However, to do this, farmers need to be equipped with enough knowledge and necessary skills so that they can be ready for the challenges and changes ahead. They also need support from the government, both financially and morally. The importance of research is also highlighted, and through research, food security issues are understood and solutions can be derived from the data gathered and analyzed. Since food systems also include people's perception towards food, understanding it through various research is crucial to the development of sustainable food systems. Overall, the initiatives of the academic institutions, such as organizing community-based programs, creation of livelihood extension projects, empowering local farmers' role in the supply chain, and promoting the importance of research are big steps towards sustainable food systems. I believe that it is through the academe that knowledge and wisdom are continuously exchanged, and without this institution, progress would be hampered. Indeed, as every speaker highlighted, working together towards sustainability is the way forward. And that would be all. Thank you for listening and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Rizali, for your excellent observations and insights. So now we go to the Q&A portion, although we really have not much time. We only have 10 minutes for the questions. So what the organizers did was to select questions, but the rest of the questions we will forward to our respected resource persons. So for the first question, this came from Dr. Maricel Ibita of ADMU. Question to Dr. Mosqueda. How is food production in Mindanao and also the crops? How do they affect the environment, especially the forest reserve of Mindanao? And conversely, how has the ecological emergency affected the food security and sustainability in Mindanao? For example, maybe disasters.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Aldaba. On the question, it's not really my area, but I will hazard an opinion. Focusing on the vegetables, like we recognize the need for assessing the impact of vegetable farming practices on the environment, particularly because vegetable production happens on the foot slopes of a forest reserve, Mount Kitanglad. So, and vegetable production has been perceived to have a negative impact on the environment, particularly because farmers tend to excessively use fertilizers, pesticides. Their tillage practices are erosion enhancing, or they promote erosion. And from the words of the farmers themselves, whenever they find degraded soils in the lower lands, they go up. So there is an encroachment of the protected forest areas. So yeah, so indirectly, I agree that an assessment should be done so that baseline conditions can be established, and perhaps even form programs that will support farmers to engage in more sustainable vegetable production. Because if we just discourage them from doing away with their main livelihood, that would also not be very effective, without a sound alternative that can be acceptable to farmers. So so that's how I could answer it.
How about
Dr. Maricel?
How about the reverse, Dr.
I don't have the sorry, I don't have
climate change and food security. Okay.
I don't have the data, but yeah. So I'm also not in that area of specialization, so I could not really, give an opinion. Thank you.
So for maybe anyone from the speakers can answer this, no? This is from Almer Belaro of the LSU. What policy recommendations have come out of your researches and initiatives, if any, that can be adopted by the LGU or any of the national government agencies? So anyone can answer. Would like to take on this? Dean Harold?
Yeah, I think on my end is, as mentioned a while ago, it's more on a partnership, because it's easy. I mean, the government can connect consumer to producer, but the question always is the long-term partnership of both consumer and producer. For instance, in tourism and hospitality industry, it's quite challenging, particularly if it's an international chain where they require certain standards.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes keeping up with the standards with the local small farmers is kind of difficult. And we have to remember that tourism is a business entity. They want to serve, they want to survive. So those are the common challenges we're encountering. So I think the policy that the government should work on is to really make sure that there is a consistent communication consistent, how to really make it long term. The partnership should be long term, because we have seen a lot of partnership that in the end of the day has just ended because of this concern and problem. So sometimes lack of communication is the common problem that we are encountering when it comes to this concern. For example, a farmer. I mean, hospitality industry sometimes don't understand seasonality, and if they need mangoes all year round, then they will force the farmers to produce mangoes all year round. So I think it's more on really talking about the seasonality of food, and it's more on the government should establish that should establish a way for us to make sure that there is continuity with the partnership.
So maybe more dialogues and venues for communication.
Yeah.
How about your take, Professor Julian, on the
Sir,
question?
for a community, they have to find a signature food item that is marketable. So what happens is, if a community has a signature, an identity, and an identified food item that they will market as their own, that becomes their signature enticement. So you can branch out from not just being a producer, but you can also consider agricultural tourism. You could also consider processing that food item into other alternative food options, so that hindi magiging issue ang seasonal. What that means is, kung ganitong panahon, hindi siya available, but you've already processed it to something else, pwede yun yung magiging available. The thing that comes to my mind is sa Benguet State University's yung kanilang strawberry tourism program. Magaling yung how they market it. And then ang kanilang sikreto is, anong gagawin mo para viable siya? Strawberry ice cream, strawberry jam. Paano naman yung gusto ng agricultural tourism? Let the tourist pick, but raise the price pag sila magpipick, dahil nandun ang inherent cost, baka mapatay nila yung halaman. Pero pag yung actual farmer na nagpipick, dahil aalagaan niya, alam niya paano mabubuhay, mas manageable yung cost nun. So dun mo ipapasok yung mga nuances. Tapos mag-create ka ng system kung saan everyone knows, if you want to go and look for this, sa amin lang, para walang competition. So that's one way. And then another aspect is also, I agree with the partnership, but first things first, tanungin natin yung community kung willing ba sila to partner or not. Unfortunately, that's something that I have experienced is, meron talagang resistant, or more than anything, worry lang sila na baka sila ay abusuhin, gamitin. So we have to find a way to bridge that yung how to communicate. Yun lang po.
Thank you, Professor Julian. Dr. Miro, what's your take on the role of the LGUs and the national agencies in your different researches and initiatives?
Yes, Dean. We actually have three main policy recommendations. So the first one is investment, not just in the first 1,000 days, but the first 8,000 days of life. I was not able to show to you our quantitative data, but it shows that older children are actually more at risk to nutrition deficiency. Siguro kasi mas napapabayaan kapag habang tumatanda yung mga bata. So while the first 1,000 days is really crucial, it's not sufficient. We need to support our children, especially when they are in school, to ensure that they stay in school. So yun po yung isang namin. And of course, we also want, we've also looked at the household and community situation of the children. And the food insecurity levels in the households of our public school children are higher than the national food insecurity level on the average. So there's really a need to support not just the children while they're in school, but also to find ways to support their households. So that's why it's important to strengthen nutrition sensitive programs also, like growing the local economy and making sure that we have our households can have enough food, because feeding is just one meal in a day. So the rest of the meals will come from the households. Ayan. And also, of course, creation of markets for our local farmers to ensure that their community would have and the farmers themselves would have food. And then finally, we also our final recommendation is ICT for data capture and harmonization. Since we've been talking about partnerships, if there are partnerships, you have to have the same data, and that's really one of the struggles here, because the feeding program, it generates data. You have the BMI, the height, the weight of the children, but they don't get stored properly. So there's so nasasayang yung data. Even the those involved in the program, in the feeding program themselves, hindi nila nakikita yung higher level ng data nila. School level lang kung anong hawak nila, hindi nila nakikita ano yung data sa ibang schools. So we actually have what we call e-health integrated nutrition program. So we developed an app for that. So but there are also a lot of things that can be done in terms of data. So I think that's
Okay.
it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miro. Actually, the presentations were very interesting, and the participants actually had more questions, but we will just direct them to you so that you can answer them. So the organizers will direct the questions to all of you. So thank you very much, our resource persons, Dr. Harold Buena, Dr. Chari Mosqueda, Professor Julian Carandang, Dr. Eden Miro, and Professor Nicolas Antigua. And then, of course, our reactors, Dr. Jaime Montesur and Rizali Dayan Estipona. So thank you very much for sharing with us your thoughts and your researches. And we also would like to thank the different organizers for this. And to cap this webinar, we now call on the program manager of the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability. He's actually our graduate. He got his bachelor's degree and PhD in biology from Ateneo de Manila University. So Dr. Eman.
Hey. Thank you, Dean Andy. For the bountiful discussion we had, it was a very loaded 2 hours. This webinar is organized by the Working Group on SDG number 20, Hunger. Needless to say, we have been facing challenges in addressing targets 2.1 and 2.2 of the SDGs, which aspire to ensure access to sufficient and nutritious food year-round. Fortunately, we have members of the Academe who update our baseline information on different facets of food security, as well as revolutionize and innovate our food production process. From Dean Harold Ben of FEU Cavite, we learned about shortening food supply chain via farm-to-table framework. We saw another side of agricultural industry from Dean Chari Mosqueda from Xavier University. Not only the small-scale farming or vegetable farming supports food security, but also livelihood and employment. Further highlighting how multifaceted the discussion on SDG 2 is, the talk of Mr. Julian Carandang of De La Salle University.
Then we move to aquaculture to the recorded talk from Professor Nicolas Antigua from Cebu Technological University, who enumerated the trainings and assistance that they provide to revolutionize aquaculture. And lastly, we looked into community nutrition and health. We learned from Dr. Eden Miro from Ateneo de Manila University the findings of the interdisciplinary CW3 lab. We also thank Dr. Jaime Montesur from FAO Philippines and Ms. Rizali Estepona from XU, who synthesized the talks and gave the recommendations. So we thank all the speakers and the reactors. As we draw the session to a close, we would like to show some slides quickly. We extend our utmost gratitude to Dean Nandi Aldaba for being our moderator this afternoon. Thank you, Dean Nandi. Thank you also to the numerous offices and departments of Ateneo de Manila, Ateneo de Davao, and Xavier University, who generously extended support in organizing and promoting this event, especially to Mr. Chris Castillo and Ms. Aleli Diaz and Sir Jack, who provided technical support for this afternoon. Thank you to Mr. Bigson Esperas for managing our preparations as well. And of course, we thank everyone for attending the session. At our peak, we are 126 strong. That's good. We're happy about that. And on that note, we hope to see you in the next installment of our different actors of sustainable food systems and the future webinar series.
Dr. Eman, di ba magpo-photo shoot pa? Di na ba?
Yes po. Magpo-photo shoot tayo, sir. Opo. As we, yes, after po lang ito, para dire-diretso na po tayo. Yes, so we'd like to invite you on November 9 for the third installment on civil societies and LGU, and on January we'll start the year with a session on government. Next slide, please. If you wish to be updated, join us po sa Facebook group namin entitled Food Systems Community Dialogues. And so we post updates in this Facebook. And lastly, before we go to our photo shoot, we would just like to announce or we'd like to invite you to answer our evaluation form. We'll post the link also on the chat. Okay, and then we'll keep in touch. Please follow us on Facebook, and you can also see our email on your screen. Okay, but for now, we would like to invite everyone, to those who can turn on their camera, to please do so as we cap off this session with a picture taking. Okay, Ms. Aleli will take your cue po.
Yes, sir, ready. On the two slides. Four slides, actually. We said start with first slide. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay po, next slide po. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Enjoyed. The link to the evaluation form is on the chat. And with that, we wish you a great afternoon. Salamat for joining us.